Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. To- Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Ben Maysfield on, and I think, this is the second time we've recorded. The other time was with Doughton. So this time, I think 4 episodes in, because the other one was split into 3, we are going to dive a little bit more into not only what creates the physique in terms of the actions, but there are so many things that social media just does not tell us. They lie to us about it, and they don't lie to us in terms of one extreme of saying you need to do this, that, and the other, but they also lie to us on the other side of the extreme where it's gone too far and we don't realize that the obstacle is sometimes the way. The hard things are sometimes the way to easy. And it's so easy to forget it now, especially I feel after lockdowns when everyone got really soft, because I realized that I did, like, before lockdowns, I also had this mentality where I realized you do need to have a lot more of a strict approach or a lot more of a routine, disciplined approach in order to earn your flexibility. But somewhere along the way, it's almost like we just earn the flexibility straight away, but then we wonder why we're not getting the results, why we can't stay consistent, why we're overwhelmed with all these choices to the point that we can't find the one thing that gets us to where we want to go. So then we blame everything but ourselves. But who is really to blame when the message is lost? So with that, here's Ben, and I'm going to allow him to introduce his favorite topic of doing the hard things. And I guess balance can't coexist when you are trying to change fundamentally who you are now, which is who you don't really want to be in this moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of expand on the point is the hard thing, and there's a lot of people that talk on this. Alex Moses talks on this, Jordan Peterson talks on this, so I'm really just stepping on toes of even greater people. But the fear I think a lot of people have, not even fear, I think it's a confrontational limitation they'll place on themselves, is that they're scared of confronting the fact that the hard stuff they're not doing is where the result lay. And we end up in this kind of limited perspective where we think, especially in this day and age of short-term gratification, of instant reward, of very accessible pleasures, convenience, and easy lifestyles, that everything should be now and that nothing should come with a hard day's work. And I think it's led a lot of people down the wrong alley in what they actually think will be what is required to get a result or get the thing that they want. We've got 45-minute delivery times on food and groceries. We've got 5-minute drive-through times in fast food restaurants. We've got purchases you can get online and have Amazon deliver things in a matter of days. And so we've developed this attachment with instant gratification, short-term gratification, and rapid responses, that we think the big goals, the big endeavors, these massive changes should be just as fast. And anything that isn't aligned with that is either too excessive, too extreme, too intense, or too hard. The reality is, when we look at it, the thing that built you up to where you are. So let's see an example of someone, whether it be male or female. You're 30% body fat, you're 40 kilos overweight, and you haven't moved your body in 20 years. The idea that you should just simply inherently get a result like a six-pack, or lose 25% of that, or drop 30 kilos of that in a matter of weeks, is almost insulting to the person that you allowed to exist, and then just expect that should correct itself without putting any hard work. The idea really starts to look at, okay, well, it took you 25, 30 years to build this position you're in, not in a position you would like. Obviously, it's a position you want to correct. But it took 30 years of life and choices and decisions to end up here. There's going to be some confrontational realities. There's going to be some confrontational hard days. There's going to be some very hard asks of you as a person to undo all of that, change that entire persona, change that entire personality, and basically correct what you allowed to happen over 30 years. And that's going to take time. Unfortunately, with the aspect of short-term gratification, this instant idea of easy work, and the easy way is the right way, people get a few months in, maybe even a few weeks, or 4 to 6 weeks into their new year goal, new year me, and it didn't move as fast as they wanted, therefore they're done. And it's usually it's a very common occurrence. I think 80% of New Year's resolutions are over in the first 6 weeks. In that instance, people are really struggling with the idea that sometimes things are just going to be hard. Balance isn't going to be achievable. You're not going to be able to, to tie it back to that great point you started there with. Balance is not going to be sustainable when you're trying to drop 25% of body fat and you're trying to undo 30 kilos of life over the last 20 years that you developed. The balance isn't simply going to be there because it's not going to allow that result to occur. There's going to be points in time where you have to do the hard thing. You have to be resilient. You have to build that mental fortitude and get okay with things being tough. And unfortunately, I just think a lot of people don't have that right now, given the state of the social media world that we're in, the purchasing capacity we have, food consumption, nutritional consumption that we have. Like, everything is very quick and very easy. And it leads to a lot of problems when we're trying to correct these in body composition, behavior change, lifestyle change, weight loss, whether it be, even not even worried about physique preparation, just those general goals that most clients tend to have. It gets too difficult for them because they're not used to doing hard things. The reality is we need to look into that hard direction.
It's balance cannot coexist with fat loss or with any extreme goals, but it also cannot coexist with your initial phases of where you are right now, because your current balance is not serving you. And what balance looks like is not a concrete definition. It changes depending, as we were speaking about before I clicked record. Everything happens in phases and seasons. I have a couple of girls that had to drop to 3 days a week of training, for an example. But you can't expect a result if you're not giving the same inputs that you were previously. Like, for example, if you got a certain result doing certain inputs, and then in a phase of life you have to scale things back, sadness and disappointment and frustration and anxiety and depression and all that comes from when your expectations are out of line with your reality. So you need to use a consistent feedback that you're getting, which is hard to get on your own, which is where a coach can come in to then realign your expectations with that. But you also have to realize that it is not forever. And it's not to say you can't still get results. With on the other spectrum of things, it's an absurd way to think that if you can't do it at the full capacity that you usually do it, what's the whole point? If you can't do a full workout, what's the whole point? It still will get you results, and it helps you maintain where you are now. It's just not to the level and your unrealistic expectations. Playing too comfortable, this is where I want you to take this. Playing too comfortable can hold you back. We went from one bro extreme of hardcore this, no pain, no gain, bodybuilding bro shit, to now resisting the work, resisting the lack of having a schedule, a routine, prepping your food, tracking your food, actually doing the steps you need to do to go to a restaurant, where people would say, oh, you don't actually have to be this strict and this calculated when you go out to eat. Well, it's like, if your usual default has got you to where you are now, then it makes sense that you will need to go through an uncomfortable period of doing some harder shit, of forcing some harder shit. For example, if you're so used to just giving into chocolate after every single meal you eat, saying, oh, it's not realistic to give up everything because that is too obsessive, that's too restrictive, but it's keeping you from where you want to be. How is that serving you any better? And it's not forever. Sometimes, actually, I want to know your thoughts on this one too. So there's two things to talk about. It's that playing too comfortable, but also sometimes if you're finding it really hard to control something or to not binge out on something, whatever it is, to control yourself around something, sometimes it does play a role sometimes it does benefit you to take it away for a while before bringing it in a more controlled environment, when you have developed the tools, where you are in a better place to now control yourself around it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million things to unpack in just those two questions. Continuing on from the point of balance, even when we look at that first question there of leaning into the easy, like you said, everything is phasic. So if you've got to a point where your set balance point, where your balance position, your set point is very easy, it's very, instant choices, gratifications. I do this after every workout. I go have like a takeaway with the girls, or I go to brunch after every Saturday morning fit class, whatever that may be. If that's your balance, okay, great. But if you've come to us as coaches, as educators and trainers and said, look, I'm not happy with where I am, I want to change some things. Well, the reality is your balance now has to shift, because what was balance had you in that position. And eventually things have to lean into being a bit more difficult, and we have to unbalance you, because, as we know, energy balance, even from a physics and food perspective, energy balance keeps you maintained. Well, energy deficit is not going to be sustainable or enjoyable or easy, but it's also not balanced. It's not a balanced point of time where, being in a 20-30% deficit is going to be fun. But at the same time, I'm sorry, but where you got to, what you were holding, what you were doing to maintain that life that you had balance with, led you to a position where you weren't really satisfied. You weren't really happy. Were you fulfilled? I've seen it time and time again where it'll be a father of 2 kids, a mother, a grandmother, or a wife, and they're too inactive, unhealthy, physically weak, where they can't spend time with the family. They can't do the things they want to do. They can't get up off the floor. They can't, pick their kids up. So to me, if that balanced position you're talking about made you so happy and satisfied, would you be in that position? And are we now, we have to, sorry to correct that, we have to be in a position to get unbalanced for a period of time so that you can have that fulfillment back and you can actually have those moments in life back. But you can't, it's not going to be balanced, because there's going to be things you have to sacrifice, there's things you have to give up, there's hard decisions you'll have to make that no longer are easy, but they're also going to serve the long-term goal that you have. And then it kind of leads into that secondary question, which hit me with it again. I'm trying to. There's a secondary question there. I know, because we have balance moving into leaning too easy, and people thinking the balance should just exist. Let me move to the second question.
Playing too comfortable because we're resisting the things that we may need to do for a phase that's not forever.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Exact summarization there is, people need to understand that these hard things, like we look at such date, like we struggle to globalize and look at a larger perspective. Time horizons for people are very hard to conceptualize. So we start doing something hard and we see day to day, like, oh, this is tough. I can't do it. The struggle is real. It's too much of a grind. I'm giving up all these things that I enjoy. I can't do this forever. No one in their right mind has ever said that a deficit phase is a lifetime endeavor. Absolutely any coach worth a grain of sand is going to tell you this is a period of time. It is phasic, and it's going to eventually reintroduce you to a new maintenance point, a new balance point, where you'll eventually get to have some things back. But for a period of time, there is a phasic approach you have to comprehend, and that is there is a phase of hardship. And that hardship is going to lead to a life of sustainability as we teach you more along the way. The idea is to narrow things, get difficult, get accepting of circumstances, get accepting of discomfort, and eventually we're going to get to a point where we can have some comfort back. But the idea that people really need to comprehend is that it's for a period of time. Whatever the big goal is, whatever the massive goal, whatever the endeavor you have, whether you be a physique athlete like people I work with, whether it be a lifestyle Gen Pop client, whether it be someone wanting to build a better relationship with their family and food, the struggle stuff, the hard stuff that you have to do is going to be phasic. Even as an example of like relationships, when I work with clients that have partners and stuff that aren't really on board with their lifestyle change, there's going to be a phase of confrontational relations where you have to hold each other accountable or have heavy discussions like, hey, when you do this around food, I don't feel comfortable. Or when I cook my meals, you decide to bake cheesecake. Those things are going to be hard conversations that you have to have. But guess what? It's phasic. Eventually you have that hard conversation. You're probably going to stop having those hard conversations because you learn with each other. You get better at it. So in whatever sense you want to apply the concept of these hard confrontational realities you have to go through, it generally leads to a better outcome in the future. But people struggle to perceive this idea that it's for a phase, it's for a period of time, and then they ignore it forever and then let it continue to go on, and it gets worse and worse. And then guess what? You're probably going to end up in another phase, and it's not a phase of your choosing, it's a phase of consequence. And it's usually not the place you want to be.
This is where discipline and routine, having structure, having control, planning ahead, while it may seem uncomfortable now, or like it's obsessive, like it's too controlling, it's actually the one thing that will set you free. And it's almost like relate to it anymore in the sense that it's just automatic for me now. Like I eat the same shit every day because I don't have to worry about what's going to happen next, what's going to happen tomorrow. I know what I'm going to shop for every single week. I save so much time not having to think up new meals. I don't give a shit about people's recipes that come up. If they're friends of mine, cool. I'll comment, say, oh, this is cool. Can't wait to try it. But I ain't going to give a shit about it because I'm already regimented. Like if I want to play around with something, I just throw shit together and see if I like it or not. But why make things more complicated than they need to be by trying to wing it every day, by trying to fall to the crowd of, no, but that's too obsessive? Since when did the whole standard of what health means isn't even healthy anymore? It's like you get called obsessive for wanting to pick the chicken salad at McDonald's over some fried chicken with a Big Mac because, oh my God, you have to have balance, or whatever else is in that category. It's like you're shamed for it. Okay, well, if I just had a burger and got a Happy Meal, I don't think anyone would have complained because that's what the majority are doing. But we don't want to be like the majority. We don't want to be like our old self. So we need to do some choices that are different from what we're used to doing. And it doesn't always mean forever. You might need to say no to so many more things in a deficit phase. Maybe when you start with a coach, you will have to do the same thing anyway, just so you can create some momentum to build that confidence within yourself, to get the coach to know how your body responds.
Yes.
But on the same spectrum, don't commit yourself to something you know you realistically can't stick to.
Yes.
It's just know exactly who you are, what your personality is like. Are you someone who can moderate? Are you someone who needs to take it slow? Are you someone who puts way too much pressure on yourself? And that's exactly why you fall off from communicating with your coach 3 days in, because you just struggled again and you're holding yourself to the expectation of, I need to tick off this habit, this habit, this habit, this habit. If your expectations are, I need to achieve all of these things because I'm paying the coach, it's a waste of money if I don't do it, then that is just as bad as not really setting any actual goals for yourself and hoping you'll just nail it off the bat. But because everything that you just said came around to this perfect narrative that I want to get you to pull apart, it's where social media lets most people down, because most of them are preaching weight loss, leaning down, bodybuilding photos. Let's get prepped for stage. The next stage to you finally eating a broccoli for the first time in your life is now making sure you eat chicken and broccoli so you prep for stage. That was quite an extreme, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
They teach you how to lose weight, but they hardly teach you anything else. The 12-week transformations, no one has patience for anything else. It's become the 12-week transformation package to let's do an 8-week, to let's do the 6-week shred. People hire coaches or buy anything just to lose weight or to lean down. They won't subscribe to anything else. And something really powerful here, because I wanted you to talk about expanding your identity, everything being PHASIC, being so attached to a number or the scale. But I think there's an element in this that no one's really talking about, and that's the fear of just letting yourself go and getting fat, the fat phobia that people hold. But to the same token, people send me their progress photos. They look completely healthy. They look pretty damn on the lean spectrum, but to them, they look fat because they're comparing themselves to a skeleton that doesn't jiggle, that doesn't wiggle, that did a photo shoot and shred it. Like, what are they even comparing to? I think this is where expanding your identity really comes into it. So with everything I just said, making that the core root pillar to then breaking away from it, how can you break apart that narrative?
Yeah, so a really important aspect, to kind of embody all of that is understanding the identity you build around yourself plays such a vital role in not just the results, but how your actions, choices, decisions, your goals align with you as a person, and how likely you are to stick with them, see them through, build that story, And it's a vital part in whether you're an athlete, whether you're a Gen Pop client, whether you're a weight loss, weight gain client, whatever it is that your goal is. The problem is a lot of people will build their identity, their narrative, and their story around the short-term struggle that they're having. That, you know, it happens a lot when you look at social media. You know, people will get validated or reinforced because they've identified with this psychological disorder or this eating disorder or this, you know, inhibition or this deficit and depreciation. And so it kind of becomes a fixated position. Like, this is who I am and this is what, you know, got me known. And, you know, obviously, as we know with social media, if you build a story and then you deviate from that, your audience gets very frustrated. So having this constant reinforced belief about yourself that, you know, if you're someone that's shredded and you take photos, your content is about being lean, and all of a sudden you start gaining weight or putting on size, you get attacked in your audience, you get attacked in your comments, people telling you you're getting fatter and blah, blah, blah. Like, the current world we live in is so reinforcing of an identity rather than a person. Not an identity, they're reinforcing of a current position. And it stems this identity and narrative that people start to build around that, because that's what they believe their worth is, or the perception of themselves. One of my favorite concepts, and we got taught this quite heavily in exercise psychology and sports psychology, is McAdams' 3-layer model. And it's basically a really cool concept of understanding personality at 3 deeper layers than just simply your dispositional traits. So layer 1 is your dispositional traits, meaning like a big 5: conscientiousness, neuroticism, agreeableness, openness, and neuroticism, extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. So that's your first stage. Then in the next stage, you have agency and self as agency. So basically, like your goals, your values, the decisions you make, the actions you make in life. And then like the third layer, the surface level layer, is your narrative. The narrative you tell of yourself, the story you create of your life, and basically how you narrate basically you're like the Morgan Freeman of your own life in Shawshank Redemption. The problem is a lot of people get so fixated and caught on telling the narrative of where they are, the problem they're going through, and sort of how they're experiencing things. And it leads to this struggling identity to break out of. So to kind of continue the point, is like we want to build that foundation understanding, is that we need to get away from outcome-focused identities, especially in people that don't just want to be extreme athletes. If you're just a general client who's like, you know what, I'm 35, me and my husband are no longer intimate, I feel gross in a bikini, you know, we haven't been intimate for at least 2 years, the kids have gotten in the way, we don't diet, we don't do anything health-wise, everything is energetically lacking, I want to change that. If you go, well, my entire identity now is about someone that struggles, or someone that can't finish a meal plan, or can't stick to a program, or, you know, my identity is about someone who only loses weight. The second we reintroduce you to more food and we get you train harder, and we say, look, to get that bum that you're talking about, that toned up glute shape, so it looks nice in a G-string, or it looks good in a bikini, and you and your husband are feeling good about it, that doesn't come from just cutting fat and cutting weight. If there's no muscle there, then there's nothing to show off. You're just building a smaller portion version of the current self you have. So you have to be understanding of the limitation you place on yourself by building that identity around cutting, or, you know, weight loss, is going to limit the actual end goal result you're trying to achieve. So having this idea that, one of the things I like to try and push is that the language you speak is important. Again, that story, that narrative level, but also the way you word the goal, the way that you word the narrative. So looking at yourself as someone who's more process orientated rather than just the outcome. Being process orientated means you look at the bigger picture, the processes over time that it takes to get there. And in your narrative sense, in your identity sense, you look at yourself as someone who is continually seeking growth and challenge. You're continually trying to push yourself to new positions. You're continually trying to seek how to make yourself better. You know, you're someone who strives to complete the hard thing, not look for the way out. When you build your narrative and identity on that, it is so much easier to sustain the hard road, the difficulties, the struggles, the hunger cues, that when you do cut weight, it's a little bit easier because you know that you're a person who finishes what they start. But inversely, when it then becomes time to build and add food and increase your training capacity, build that bigger bum, build the wider shoulders, the thicker legs, well, now you're someone who can handle eating more food and getting a little bit softer, because your entire identity isn't just isn't just attached to someone who loses weight. Because the second you make that about just losing weight, it becomes so much harder to grow, increase food, get healthier again. Again, we go back to that phasic approach of not having balance. We need to look at, are you trying to be someone who's continually, perpetually cuts weight and diets and stays lean or tries to get lean forever? Or are we trying to build some muscle? Are we trying to add some curves? Are we going to increase some thickness? Do we want to put it in certain spots, bigger shoulder, bigger legs, bigger back, bigger bum, whatever? That's going to take it's going to take a period of time or a phase of time where we're increasing our food. So now all of a sudden, if I say, hey, as a client, we're going to start jacking up your calories because I want to get you bigger, fuller, stronger, more muscle. And you go, oh, hang on, I'm someone who I just want to lose weight. I just want to tone up and look sexier. Okay, that's great. But now we've got to try and change your entire perception of what muscle gain is, of what nutrition is, because all you think it is as a narrative and identity is weight loss. It makes it a lot harder for you as the individual psychologically to flip that switch, because your entire identity is built around that idea of just losing weight or of just dropping body fat.
Trying to build muscle, but also trying to be as lean as you can, wanting to build muscle, but refusing to eat enough because you're scared of the scale or scared of gaining more weight, scared of seeing the scale tick up above a certain number, which was me. I hated seeing anything go above a certain number, which this is the funny part, which maybe you can put a saying into this, write this down. But I never started off obsessed about the scale. And that's why I saw the best progress I honestly saw my best progress within my first 8 months, because I was chasing the scale going up. I was building muscle and I looked freaking amazing in that sense that I made such a change to my body. I gained a good, I think, 6 kilos in that 8 months, but I did come from a rather small frame. But I actually looked like I progressed and I didn't have any issue over that number. And then I prepped for the first time, and all of a sudden everything became about the scale. And even a couple of years later, I was fearful of seeing it go above a certain number. And I'm actually now 6 kilos heavier than that number. And like, while there is still, I know that I am happiest at this body weight, which isn't the body weight that I am now. It's probably add another 2 kilos, 2.5 kilos. That's where I know that I was still happy at that body weight. But I feel like that same attachment that I have, but I know that I was happy at that body weight too. People have a negative connotation with weights on the scale before they even started to do things the right way, because they fear that as soon as they stop tracking things so intently, like as soon as they stop thinking about losing weight, as soon as they stop monitoring their body like it's under 24/7 surveillance, that they're just going to gain weight all of a sudden. They're just going to lose all of their progress. It's this horrible fear that people have that stop them from getting to where they want to be. And then they're scared to eat more. They're wanting to cut calories, waiting for the next fat loss phase. They're in this place where they're not able to physically feel free because they are constantly putting themselves under such scrutiny, such surveillance, and without realizing it, despite some people are seeing results, but there are also people that aren't physically seeing results. They're like living in this limbo where they're trying to live in maintenance, but they're not really living. They're just barely hanging on, waiting for the next fat loss phase, like I said, scared to allow themselves a little bit more flexibility. So they're in this place, once again, where what is it that you're trying to achieve? Because you're not allowing yourself to move either way. You're never going to give the effort you can give to a fat loss phase because you are so fatigued from living in this state your whole life, but you're not letting yourself go. So there are two different people there, plus my own, because there are people that have seen the results, but now they know that it's not serving them right now, and they need to allow themselves to build. They need to allow themselves to let go of obsessing over tracking their body weight so meticulously, tracking their body so meticulously, and judging themselves.
Yeah, so it really, like where we're landing here is a really good point to understand kind of everything we've already been talking about, right? Like, so we need to look at these balance points, these pivot points. We need to look at the extremities. We need to look at these phasic approaches. And I think people I don't say coaches, they're not deliberately doing this, but they don't explain, they don't help the client understand. And therefore it's hard to put the pressure on the client to understand. But when you understand the why, the how becomes a lot easier. But when you also have a why, you can bear almost any how. So when we're looking at clients at the level of like these neurotic levels of tracking, obsessive data accumulations, the point for the average person really should be a phasic approach to, yes, tracking. We want to be tracking data. We want to be tracking information. We want to get you to a weight loss phase. We want to get you to a decrease in body fat, improve your body composition, because we know it's healthier. We know all the benefits. But here's the thing that people get wrong, I think, for the average person is they don't educate the client to be able to do it without them. And this is where a big issue comes when it comes time to step away from the scale. They freak out because they haven't been told, hey, if you follow these habits, we build these foundational skills and abilities, that being like ticking certain fruit and vegetables a day, making sure you have a portion of protein per meal, water intake, diet soft drinks, and diet, sugar sweetened beverages. When you teach someone these things, you can include them and how to include them. Then all of a sudden, like, we can do a 3-4 month phase with no tracking. And guess what? You're probably going to be in roughly the same 1 to 2 kilo radius, because we're eating the same quantities and portions and nutrient diversities, but it's not having to be obsessively tracked. We should be teaching you to develop tools and abilities so that you can go through life and know when it's time to change. So if you're phasically being taught to track food and weigh your food and weigh yourself on the scale, the intent should be, if you're not an elite athlete or someone intending to be shredded and dick skin lean on a stage, or hitting a 300 kilo PB on a platform or out on a sporting field, learn these tools so that your identity isn't built entirely around this concept of weight loss. We can learn these tools, and then eventually you phase out of it and go, okay, for the next sort of period of time, you're good to go.
Yeah, but it's not also learning those tools just for weight loss. And this is the important thing, because it's like,
exactly.
This is why I'm so big on people using kitchen scales. Like, weigh your freaking food, track your inputs, because you have no idea what's going to happen on the outside of it. And it could send you backwards. Like, you're so focused on that end outcome that you're not focusing in on the process. The process is where it happens. I actually think that was part of the book, so I want you to talk about that more. But the process is where it all happens. Like, you cannot get to where you want to be without that. Your why isn't a definite destination. It is a direction. It is like saying, I want to, this was in one of my previous podcasts, it's like saying, I want to go east. You never reach east. You just continue in that direction. Sometimes progress doesn't mean moving forward. Sometimes it means moving backwards to take a different route. Sometimes it means staying still. This is why you need to be so patient in the process and not see fast, instantaneous results, or just leaning down or waiting for the next fat loss phase as the only thing that means progress, because you are holding yourself back from any progress. Because what if the very thing you need to do is to let go of the reins of restriction, of tightly monitoring all these little things, trying to eat as little as possible, even though you're not really eating as little as possible. It's just that you're scared to blow it out, so you're mentally restricting. What if that is actually the path to where you want to go? And you can't say that you want to turn your pancakes into beefcakes. Yes, you can't say you want to turn your pancakes into beefcakes and then complain when your pants are getting tighter, and then put yourself back into a fat loss phase, and then wonder why you're not seeing results. The why and the how, the answers aren't always known at first either. You need to have a flexible identity, a flexible mind, pivot to evolve. But within this flexibility, you're not just flexible like a loose cannon. There are still restraints around that flexibility, and that is knowing, how do you want to feel? How will it feel when you achieve your goals? Because it's not about the goal itself. No one is doing this just for an outcome. You want to feel a certain way. But you said this when I commented on your post. You can't build something from nothing. You can't expect to look toned if there was nothing built underneath. And I think that's where people go wrong. I'll bring the next part up later.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I think it's such a part of the process that people fail to comprehend, is they get so fixated on the outcome. They get so fixated on, like, I've got to be 66 kilos and at 5% body fat and yada, yada. The funny part is, when you really look at composition, recomposition, composition, recomposition, the weight and scale that you hit every time is probably going to be roughly the same, but it looks so different. But if you look at it, I guess, through the process of like the short-term phase, like, 2 to 4 weeks, oh, down 6 kilos, it feels great. And now I feel good about myself because that's what my goal was. But the reality is, when we probably build you back up to get back to that weight that you initially started at, it's probably going to be in a more toned position. It's probably going to have more muscle mass. You're probably going to look fuller, have more curves, and feel more confident because you're eating better, you're training harder, you have more muscle, you have more size to your structure. But you are so fixated believing that the goal was this number because that's all you've perceived. And this is something that I was going to allude back to before, is the amount of people that I've worked with, females and males, have this same problem. They believe that weight loss is the goal, when the reality is it's more likely fat loss and increased or improvement in muscle mass. And the two are not synonymous at all, though obviously we know that for fat loss to occur, generally we're in a deficit, and weight loss will probably pair with it. But when we look at and this is a really good addition to the point you're just making, knowing what you want to feel like, I call it defining a success criteria. What does the success actually look like to you? Because to me, and this is where, again, balance becomes so important, my success criteria to the average person is mind-blowingly extreme. But to me, it is normal everyday life because I've defined a clear success criteria as to what that's going to be. That is a pro card in the IFBB. It is working with elite athletes. It's working with elite people. It's pushing high levels of performance at all branches of life. That's a very extreme level for me to be at. But to me, that's my success criteria. So I know when I'm working towards that it makes sense. That's my balance. For the average person, my balance is so far off to the extreme and skewed that it wouldn't even comprehend as normal in their head. But I've defined that success criteria, so I know what that's going to look and feel and sound and smell like. For the average person, I don't believe most people have actually defined a success criteria for most of their goals in life. And so when things start to vary or modify or change, they're so lost, they're frustrated, they're angry. But the thing is, they don't even know what they're really working towards. They aren't really clear on that point they're trying to get to, or what that success even feels like. So to the point there where it's like, you think that the weight loss is the goal. You think this weight loss number, this magical number, is going to be the end point you're going to be satisfied with. And we know, going through behavior change, CBT, motivation interviewing, the amount of times when you use Socratic question with a client properly, and you really try to explore, why is weight loss your goal? I want to lose 5 kilos. Okay, but why? The last time I was 5 kilos less was a more intimate time in my life. Me and my partner were a lot more sexually active and physically connecting. And also I felt really good in this bikini and I was a lot more confident in myself. Okay, so it's probably not 5 kilos. It's more of a self-confidence thing. Yes. So if we taught you how to eat better, feel better, train better, move better, and with that came a reduction in body composition, regardless of weight, that'd be the same goal, right? Oh yeah, probably. Okay, so we've got a clear example here that weight loss was not the goal, and improvement in body composition and developing self-confidence was. So this idea that this number has to be the endpoint, when you haven't even clearly defined a success criteria, is almost contradicting. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong in their identity of trying to be so fixated on this number changing. The amount of times that I personally have been above and below 100 kilos, and each time in the different phases of my approaches with my coaches, it's been a different look for a different reason at a different point in my life. So if the number was purely, I've got to be 100 kilos, I could be a fat 100 kilos, I could be a shredded 100 kilos, I could be an on stage 100 kilos, I could be an off-season 100 kilos. It's so different based on, the reason or the timing or the age or the experience that I hit that number. And I think a lot of people don't really comprehend that it's not always the number. It's not always that weight loss, that scale weight that you have to check and track and constantly keep up. It's actually defining what is the success criteria that you want to actually achieve, which means having your goals clearly mapped out, having your values mapped out as a person, understanding what your priorities are. Even if, to kind of add to this, even if you were clear on your goals and your success criteria, if you as a person look at your priorities and say, you know what, the thing required to get to that goal, I'm actually not willing to give up my priorities to change my priorities to get that. We have to re-examine that as well. because you might not be someone in this point in time that is willing to do that and get to that point. The amount of mums that I know that recognize that being a loving mother, stay-at-home mother, a caring mother was more important than being a physique athlete and getting on stage, completely redefined our goals together because it wasn't actually what they wanted. But are you willing to have that conversation? Are you willing to explore that success criteria and define it and say, actually, I don't think I want that anymore. I'm going to have a different goal. I want to be thicker. I want to be stronger. I want to be bigger. I want to perform better. I want to be more fed. I want to be a better mother, better wife. They all impact the goal, the outcome, what we're trying to achieve. And I think a lot of people don't really take the time to figure that out. They just start a journey of health and go, oh, it's weight loss. To kind of wrap that point back.
Yeah, it's almost like how you get from A to B determines if you can actually get from C to D, if at all. And your balance and your success criteria, as you were talking about, it can evolve and change as you do. And that is okay. Sometimes we don't slow down enough to realize our initial goals aren't our now goals. And we need to let go of obsessing, once again, over losing weight, when the next battle phase is, and ridiculously thinking that you can uncover the muscle you just built within 6 months of just building, because you're not going to uncover anything in 6 months of building. And I'm sure you can attest to that. Like, these quantitative measures hold us back from allowing ourselves to check in with how we feel, what we need to focus on, so that we can build a lifestyle we truly love and one that we can sustain any results we get and keep achieving more. Like, it might be more obsessive to start with. So I take that back. Like, you might actually need to be a little bit more obsessive about doing your shopping, about prepping your food, planning your food, dealing with the discomfort of maybe eating the same shit every day for a while, dealing with the reheated food that you say that you can't stand. So then you're left having no actual consistency with your food because you're not building a routine. It gets easier if you do the process. And what you need to do now, once again, isn't forever. You're allowing yourself in the process to learn about how you can shift, how you can modify things. You're allowing yourself to get some leeway, to buy some time back so that you can focus on the other things. You can focus on, okay, so this is the meal plan that I created for myself, which is infinitely better than someone just handing you one without your own input. Like you said, autonomy. This meal plan I made for myself, I know that I can stick to it. So I'm going to stick to it every day for a while. Then little by little, I'm going to learn how I can start to play around with it without overhauling the whole thing, every single recipe, every single day, and then wondering why I'm back to the start, overwhelmed and not getting anywhere, why I'm back to feeling like I'm getting nowhere, I'm out of control, my body is fat, this, that, and the other. Because here's one, when you feel less in control of everything that's around you and of your inputs, the things that you do, you become a lot more self-critical of your body and feel that you need to change everything about yourself.
Yeah, right. No, I agree. It's one of the funniest things to me is it's one of my favorite quotes is that freedom is found in discipline. And it's one of the most extreme, most influential, profound concepts for people to comprehend, because everyone views them as dichotomously opposing. They're almost like extreme opposites, that being disciplined, having freedom, but you pick one or the other. But the fact is, to get to that point of freedom that you are talking about, to get that point of freedom of not having to weigh yourself, not having to weigh food on the scale every single day, not having to consider meal options when you go out to a restaurant, or look ahead of time, pre-plan your food choices, or pre-plan your strategy for going to a restaurant, or going out with the girls, or having a brunch. To get to that point of freedom, well, guess what? It's going to take a point of some extremes and disciplines that you're not used to. And extreme to everyone is going to differentiate. It's going to vary. So for me, like when we look at that, the extreme of someone who's never tracked food before is simply downloading MyFitnessPal and weighing some food. The extreme of someone that works with me as an athlete, not my Gen Pop clients, is getting to 3% body fat. Extreme is different for everyone, but we have to be willing to accept that for points of time, we might require some extreme changes of behavior, phasic approach, to learn and discipline ourselves to get to that point of freedom where you can have those more free food choices, that more variation and flexibility. But again, you've got to understand that freedom comes from the discipline. I mean, one of the funniest things to me that makes me laugh is people that attack tracking and meal plans and structured eating. You can have the Australian Dietary Guidelines, and that's one way to approach nutrition. The second you put that into a structured 5 square meals a day, all of a sudden that's obsessive and neurotic. To me, that is such a crazy idea that being accountable to the same thing that the Australian government is telling you healthy and should be eaten into a structured meal plan is now some weird, over-obsessive, over-neurotic, highly conscientious task that is, borderline psychotic. But the reality is just taking a very loosely laid out meal idea or food idea, nutrition idea, and put it into a structured plan. Now, that to me is just a degree of time where we're narrowing down what you're going to eat. We're limiting your consumption of other things, but we're developing a knowledge on what good, healthy eating is so that in the future, when you deviate and you go out with the girls and you have a pizza night or you have a movie night and you have some snacks, well, guess what? The next day, you wake up, you get back on your nutrition, you get back on your water, you go for a morning walk, you make sure your digestion's good, you pass waste, and now all of a sudden the weights come back down. It's not a big deal. But again, you don't know that until you've learnt those disciplines and those routines and those habits to understand those skills. Now that you have them, you have the freedom to enjoy yourself. It's really not this like mind-blowing, life-altering concept people make out to be. You're not developing an eating disorder or some neurotic behaviors. You're just learning to discipline yourself, learn some structures, and take control of your nutrition, take control of your goals, so that you can have the freedom later that you're so incessantly craving and talking about. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't really view it that way, and we end up with these opposing arguments of, any tracking or any accountability is wrong and dangerous. And you shouldn't have to look at a scale when you go to a restaurant. You shouldn't have to be conscious of food choices. I disagree, because the version of you that wasn't conscious of those things led to the version of you that wants to change.
That sparked an idea, because it's like people want to get to this place where they never have to think about it. I know that comes from the fact that you have been so severely restricting for most of your time. You only ever cared about your nutrition and tracked your food for the meanings of weight loss. You never did it for anything else, for performance, for energy, for tracking your actual micronutrients, for just being a better version of yourself. No wonder you're so exhausted from doing it all. Like, it doesn't have to be the way that it's been sold. And this is another lie that social media is telling us, like, it has to be difficult. It's like you need to find that Goldilocks zone. And that will change a lot of the time, because like we spoke about, you might need to keep making that harder choice to start with, because if you keep choosing that easier one, the one that's okay, moderately warm, you might still keep getting the same old results because you haven't forced a disequilibrium to find a new equilibrium. I don't know if you read the book Master of Change. I fucking love it. It's like you need to go through a disorder, which is exactly that, to find a new reorder, which is the order that better serves you from the old order, because the old order was what had you where you weren't happy with it. And same to what you were saying with the whole flexibility thing, like most of those people, I can say for myself, I hardly ever track my food because I eat the same shit every day anyway. And if I change things here and there, I'm like, who cares? But I didn't start off this way.
Mm-hmm.
I went through periods of rigid tracking, rigid trying to do everything, rigid calculating everything to get to a place where I can have this flexibility, where I can look at a plate, where I can go on holidays and not track and still maintain my body. Saying no to things means that you're saying yes to less desirable things, things that you don't want. So isn't it better if you choose your fuck yes?
Mm-hmm.
Bring in the process here, because I'm going to keep harping on the process for you to talk about why is the process so important? Why do we need to know the basics and build the bricks? People are this is what we talked about. I forgot about this one. People are too obsessed about what phase are we in, what season am I in now, what am I focusing on now, instead of realizing that there's no such thing as phases and seasons. It's all fluid. It all flows together. But none of that matters if you're too busy focusing on what's being built when there's no foundation yet, when there are still bricks that are missing. And I have this analogy, this quote, which I need to copyright, but it's like, you need to build the bricks, but you also need to build the mortar for a strong foundation. That mortar is your mindset, because if you let that mindset slip, or you haven't built up a strong mindset, what's going to happen to the whole building when it rains, when it storms, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great point that people have to consider. Like the foundations before anything else, like learning the foundational behaviors and habits and skills. It doesn't matter what extreme level or what intensity my clients work with me. The foundations are what we base from first and foremost. They're the parts that we build off. They're the parts that we run with. They're the parts that we expand on. So, the amount of people that get so concerned with the macros and the, in macros in sense of like, what time is my food getting consumed? Or, am I taking this 5-hour morning routine habit system that I've built? Am I, getting enough, anal sun tanning that everyone thinks, like these weird things that people get to get so caught up on in these micro behaviors and habits that have a net 1% return, but they're missing so many of the fundamental foundational behaviors that regardless of season, they should be the premise that you build from regardless, whether it be cutting, growing, whether it be life, it be marriage, it be the study time, prep, whatever. The fact is that fundamentally we should have a baseline of knowledge of health and the fundamental behaviors that need to go into things. And that's, maximizing sleep, diversity of nutrients and fiber, vegetables, fruits, hydration levels, spacing of protein or having adequate protein over the day, total calorie consumption knowledge. These fundamental concepts that we should be easily aware of and building from in regards to then making changes. So, before we even get to these like, awesome cutting phases, growing phases, what have you, building those baseline knowledges first is so important to longevity of success and then also sustain them in the future. Like there might be a point in time when you found that happiness, you found that point where you're like, I'm good. Well, guess what? If you haven't built the skills and foundations of the brick and mortar to sustain that I'm good, it's probably going to go just as quickly as you got it. So taking the time to build that foundation first so that eventually you can get to a balance point and you might be able to hold that balance point until you decide to change it up a bit, or maybe you want to do something different. That's important. That's integral to sustainability and longevity. You might not want to be a bodybuilder forever. You might not want to be a weight loss client forever. But if we teach you the fundamental behaviors and then we can make small modifications, it becomes so much easier to sustain and actually achieve and be content with. I think a lot of people get that wrong.
There's two different things that I want to talk about, but they could go on for ages. So one thing that I just want to bring back again is actually going from overweight to lean. If you do it right in the sense that you're doing some form of strength training, you will appear as though you lost fat and built muscle. Yeah, you probably built some muscle, but most of that is what that heavy body was already carrying around under it. I guess if you did have a coach in the meantime and you trained really hard, then you probably built a little bit more. But it works until it doesn't. And it's the same as building from a more empty canvas, which is the majority of people that I guess come to you and come to me, like they are trying to build from nothing, but they're scared to go through the building process. And you put down these 6 points as well in the biggest tips to help you through the period of actually embracing building your body. And you do need to understand that the scale weight is not going to be a reliable metric anymore, because it's not going to be a metric that serves you, full stop. You need to be able to focus on where are your lifts going in the gym? What is your input like in terms of calories, in terms of nutrition? But people are also expecting to only gain lean muscle, and like they aren't supposed to get any fat in that process.
Yeah, that's an important part of the process narrative being so to understand is that the process looks different for everyone, sure, but the understanding is how we approach that process, what it looks like, what it feels like, what's going to happen, and getting comfortable with it. So we know that to build muscle, to put some size on, to build something, there is an acclimation of muscle mass, but also fat mass. In the sense of energy equilibrium, energy balance, if we're going to make a modification, we're going to increase food so that you can build tissue, because you can't build a skyscraper without having the materials on site. So you need to make sure that you have adequate material on site to build the building you're trying to gain, or you're trying to achieve. Now, some of that will be fluffy, it'll be fat, it'll be stuff that you probably don't want to be there. But part of that process is learning to be comfortable in that skin, learning to be comfortable in different phases of yourself, learning to be comfortable with different versions of yourself, that different appearances, different looks, different weights. It's understanding that the process is so much more than one specific outcome. The process is going to be phasic. It's going to be over a period of time. You're going to build for a certain amount. You're going to build for a point, and then eventually you're going to probably cut down a little bit, sure. But it's not going to be that you're just getting fatter and fatter and fatter. We know that there's a nice sweet spot for most people. If the exact numbers are kind of eluding me. I think I aim for with my clients about 300 to 500 grams a week for a natural athlete or a natural client that's trying to improve muscle mass is a pretty sweet spot to expect some rates of lean muscle gain, but also a degree of fat mass will go with it. What we do see is that if you just simply increase more calories beyond that, you're probably just accumulating more fat mass for no reason. You're not getting any more muscle mass. The same amount of muscle will probably occur, but fat mass will increase. So what we do then is look at that and go, okay, I don't want you to gain excessive amounts of fat mass. I'm just trying to fatten you up. We want to primarily focus on the process of improving your performance in the gym, improving your performances of sleep, improving your performances of nutrition, improving your performances of activity levels. So you're healthy, you're sleeping better, you're training harder, you're well fed. In those performances and the process of that goal, you're probably limiting the fat gain that you're going to achieve. So therefore, the most amount of muscle you can gain is occurring. When we do decide it's time to come back and strip some fat off, you've actually got a baseline of muscle now to look at and have underneath, but it took a period of time to get there. It took a phase of accumulating calories, accumulating some fat, but also training hard and building that muscle. And I think that's an early point in time people need to comprehend is that even when you do go through a gaining phase and this fear or phobia of putting on fat and this hesitation of putting on fat, is that you're not instantly just going to go back to it. And I've had this with several clients that came to me from post-obesity lifestyles, is that the idea of reintroducing food and going over a certain number created anxiety, provoked fear in them, because they were so concerned that this growth mentality was going to lead to them just being fat again. We had to rechange and redefine and challenge that narrative, challenge that irrational thought and belief, because we know that to gain the muscle we want to have, to change that appearance, we actually have to increase some food, put some fat on, put some muscle on. And now they're some of the happiest clients that I have because we've been able to flip that story, change that overall identity, and have them reconsider what it was they wanted to achieve. And now they've got, more food than they've ever eaten, more muscle mass than they've ever had, but also in a much better body compositional position than when they came down. And that's something that people really don't understand well enough, and it's what probably creates some of that fear. But when you can look at it through that lens of that process, you're going to realize the process happens cyclically, repeatedly. It's over time. It's ever changing and consistently going until you're at a point where you're like, you know what, I'm happy. But when you find that happiness point, you find that satisfied point, you've probably learned, or hopefully you've learned, I'd say if you work with people like us, you've found that the tools required to sustain it, and now you can go, you know what, I'm good here. Fantastic. You've got the skills and abilities now to maintain that. You've found a balance point after a period of discipline and hard work that you can now have that freedom that you wanted.
It's like you went through the process. You didn't just end up where you are now. So stop fearing that you're just going to end up back where you were, because you have built those tools. You are the person. If you haven't allowed yourself to become friends or to get to intimately know that new identity of you, you are always going to fall back to your baseline identity of who you don't want to be, which for many people, it's the identity of a dieter. So you always find yourself back on a diet. You need to allow your identity to change with you. You need to do this questioning. You need to do this journaling. You need to do this curiosity process and allow yourself to have that time with a coach, especially. Like it's hard to look at your own situation with your own eyes within the same perspective, because you only see things from the perspective that you've gained and through the experiences that you've had in the past. So having someone else guide you through this, even like, in a sense, it's almost like this whole, you want to be able to go off on your own, but at the same time, no, you don't. You want, because it's not just teaching you how to lose weight. Like that is a time of the past. It's now teaching you how to take that initial progress and turn it into something with greater purpose, something that builds you up, something that serves the person that you want to become and keeps feeding that, because programming is progressive. You are progressive. You do not just die at the end of a transformation. Like, it is ongoing. Yet people think that all you do is get to this magic endpoint and that's the end. I want you to just title up with the main theme of this, in that your identity matters, discipline and routine set you free, and instant gratification is why you will never ever get your end goal, because you expect to get 7 years of progress in 7 months and 12 months of progress in 12 weeks. The 12 to 16 week minimum that coaches usually have, some have 6 months, which is amazing, but that is really only a starting ground because of the complexities of being human, our behaviors and our beliefs. So I guess that's the best way to end this, because I think that last point is really important to drive home.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the point there, like, it's, how do you even wrap it up? Like, we're essentially saying here, you know, that you need to come to terms with accepting the person you're going to become. You're essentially betting and you're investing on this. And I guess this is a really easy way to put it, is that delayed gratification is investing and betting on the future version of you that you want to be over the instant version of the person you are now. And a lot of people make the instant choices instead of making that gamble on the future. And when we invest in a coach, when we invest in the process, we're investing in the fact that I know where I am now is not what I want. Because if it was what you wanted, you'd be making all the short-term plays, like, you know, eating the pizzas, eating the donuts, eating the ice cream, not going for your walks, not doing training, missing workouts, oversleeping or undersleeping. So this version of this person you're trying to become, you're building the identity around that. You're building around, this is the new life that I want. This is the person I want to become. You're accepting of the fact, you're building this narrative around growth, around hardship, around struggle, around resilience, and you're willing to accept and lean into it. You're willing to recognize that to get to this new person you want to be is going to mean sacrificing things of what I want now for what I want later. And it means accepting that there's going to be a period of struggle and hardship in amongst that. There's going to be periods of discipline. There's going to be periods of hard work and dedication to something that I'm not going to be comfortable with, but that doesn't mean it's restrictive. It doesn't mean that it's neurotic. It doesn't mean it's obsessive. It means that there's going to be points in time where we might say, hey, let's consider what you eat at the restaurant. Let's consider what you eat at the wedding. Let's consider what you eat at the girls' day on the party boat. Those things are going to require a period of time, a phasic approach of hard work, of uncomfortability, of discomfort, and it's going to force you to do some things perhaps you don't want to do. But in order to get to that version of you, that new version of you want to have, that new identity, that new narrative, you're going to have to do some of these things to learn how to get there. And then once you get there, you've probably built the skills and abilities to make a pivot or a change. You know what? I've reached the body fat levels that I want. Now I want to learn how to eat more. Or now I want to just simply stay here for a period of time, hold maintenance, enjoy life a bit, take a step back on training, and just focus on my nutrition and my general health. The skills we've taught you along the way are going to help you get there and do that. And that's pretty much the easiest way to really comprehend the whole point of this chat, is that it's not restriction forever. It's not dieting and tracking food forever. It's not obsessively neurotic forever. A dieting phase, if that is the goal, is a selective period of time in which we starve the body and we restrict calories. It is not something you run forever or for life. It is something we do for a point in time to achieve a certain result, to then modify and make changes. That's all this is. We're making phasic approaches and processed approaches to achieve a look or a desired outcome that we can then modify from there to change based on what you want once you're there. But you can't make that change once you get there until you get there. So it means to get there, we're going to have to do some hard shit.
I love that so much. You have to choose your hard and not the wrong hard, because ice baths and freaking withholding coffee for 2 hours and all that other bullshit is the hard stuff that you don't need, and it's the hard stuff that won't get you to where you want to be. Choose the right hard, and you will find that soon it becomes that much easier for you to live the lifestyle with less friction.
Exactly.
So with that, thank you for another amazing episode. And if you guys want to check out Ben, I will leave his handle down below, and in his bio, you will find the Meta Mentality Instagram handle, and you will also find his podcast, Matter Mentality Podcast.
The Matter Mentality Podcast, yeah, you'll find us there as well. That'll be in my Instagram bio. You'll find our training YouTube. You'll find a whole list of free stuff. One of the biggest things we try to do is ensure that it doesn't matter whether you work with us or not. We give away so much free stuff because these conversations are what's lacking in coaching. These valuable knowledge pieces are what's lacking in coaching. So a lot of the stuff we give away basically free. You'll find a short course of information basically between a YouTube, podcast, and downloadable resources. Our goal setting sheet, the way we approach goal setting, is free to download. I recorded a 15-minute lecture on it, so people just download it and use it. So there's so many things that just go and take away. So, you don't owe us anything. We are here to serve you as coaches. So for us, that means give you information.
I love that so much. So if you guys took anything away from this, let us both know. And I will also let you know that that goal setting sheet isn't about what you're going to finally achieve in 12 weeks. It goes beyond that, because your life is more than
5 years.
Yeah, your life is more than a 12-week project, because you are not a project. You are a human being living a life, and life is nothing but a game in practice. And the more that you try to take it so seriously, the less fun you're going to have with it. And you can't have a happy ending with an unhappy journey. So with that, love you all, and you will catch me on the next one.